pleased to be asked to moderate this, this panel because it's centered around everything that's important to me, which is education and jobs and the economy. So I want to start with a few opening comments, and then I'll try to judge things time-wise to give all of our four panelists time to have some comments. And please, as we've said before, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and interrupt. We're more than happy to let the conversation go where you want it to go. Economic outcomes depend on educational achievement. The health and productivity of North Carolina's economy depends on the health and productivity of North Carolina's education system. We know that a stronger North Carolina is going to lead to a stronger North Carolina economy. And we've heard that from Michael Horn's comments and Cheryl's keynote. They set the tone for just how important having a well-trained workforce is for our economy. Both speakers emphasized that we must develop our human capital. The major findings from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Leaders and Laggers, a state-by-state report card on K through 12 educational effectiveness, and the 2014 North Carolina Economic Needs Survey underscore the importance of the connection between education and the economy. Students in class today will enter the workplace tomorrow, a workplace that increasingly requires the critical thinking and adaptability that a post-secondary education can and must provide. And as an entrepreneur myself and an employer, I see that every single day, and it's increasing. According to the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce, between 2008 and 2018, North Carolina will create 1.4 million job vacancies, both from new jobs and from job openings due to retirement. About 60% of those job vacancies, or 833,000, will be for those with post-secondary credentials. About 30%, or 413,000, for high school graduates, and 172,000 for high school dropouts. To help us further understand this changing dynamic, I'm joined today, as I said, by our four panelists who are going to share their successful strategies for connecting education and the economy for a stronger North Carolina. And I know that when I'm getting advice or getting insights, I always like to know who I'm hearing from. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one, although I don't think any of them really need a lot of introductions. On your program, you thought you were going to hear from Dale Jenkins today. Unfortunately, he's ill. And we're very fortunate that Lou Ebert has volunteered to sit in on his behalf. Lou became president and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber in August of 2006. He heads the nonpartisan business advocacy organization that works in the legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to proactively drive positive change to ensure that North Carolina is a leading place in the business to do business. Leading place in the world to do business. Under Ebert's leadership, the Chamber is now actively engaged in the whole game, focusing on a long-term strategy for economic prosperity, advocating for public policy to drive this vision, and measuring the political outcome to hold elected leaders accountable on the jobs agenda. The Pennsylvania native brought 26 years of state chamber experience to North Carolina. He worked for 23 years at the Pennsylvania Chamber before taking the post of president and CEO of the Kansas Chamber in 2003. So that's Lou. Second, we have Jeff Lang at third down. Jeff is Vice President and General Manager of MetLife Global Technology and Operations, or GTO, a leading global provider of insurance, annuities, and employee benefit programs. As its first employee, Mr. Lang is the ambassador for GTO in Raleigh, where MetLife is committed to delivering innovative solutions and infrastructure that will help MetLife deliver a world-class customer experience. He's responsible for overall site management, community and university relations, talent recruiting, new hire onboarding, and employee support for GTO Raleigh. So obviously he knows something about this topic. Prior to MetLife, Mr. Lang worked for IBM for 22 years and then RBC Bank in Raleigh, where he was responsible for all information technology of the regional bank. He holds a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Pittsburgh. Second to my left is Tom Ross. Tom is president of the 17 campus University of North Carolina. He's a graduate of Davidson College and the UNC Chapel Hill School of Law. He previously has served as president of Davidson, executive director of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, a Superior Court judge, and the director of the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts. He also has practiced law, served as a congressional staffer, and served on the faculty of the UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. His many honors include the Rehnquist Award for Judicial Excellence and Distinguished Alumni Awards from both Davidson and the UNC Chapel Hill School of Law. Last but not least, we've got Dr. Scott Rawls. Scott is the president of the North Carolina Community College System, with 58 colleges serving almost 850,000 people annually. North Carolina Community College System is one of the largest systems of higher education in the United States and is internationally recognized for programs to foster economic and workforce development. Under his leadership, the community college system has garnered national recognition for their collective efforts to foster student success and program completion, including designation by the Brookings Institution and Rockefeller Foundation as one of the 10 state and metropolitan innovations to watch in 2012. Dr. Rawls is the recent chair of the National Council of State Directors of Community Colleges. So thank you so much to the four of you for agreeing to serve on our panel this afternoon. I'm personally very interested in hearing about your comments, as I'm sure that our audience is. So to begin, we've had thought-provoking discussion this morning about the philosophical and practical connections between education and the economy. The 2014 Employer Needs Survey indicates that 45% of employers had difficulty hiring. There's a high diversity of industries and occupations with those difficulties. Third, the top needs for a talented workforce are work experience, education credentials, and technical skills. Fourthly, it took 3 times longer to hire difficult-to-fill positions than regular positions. And lastly, nearly half use workforce development or education systems to help meet their employment and training needs. So because this panel is balanced between business and education leaders, I know that we're going to be able to get a broad perspective on this information. So we're going to start with Lou. There may be a misconception that business is not engaged in education. Talk to us about this. What is the Education 2030 roadmap, and why is education one of the 4 pillars?
Sure. That's a great question, and actually, if there's a misperception, I'm not aware of it, and actually, in this state and this country, I think you just heard from the U.S. Chamber and certainly from our board, it's non-existent. As the number one, I like Cheryl's point, the number one consumer of talent in North Carolina, business leaders of all types and shapes and sizes recognize that talent, human capital, is really the vital link between the kind of jobs we're trying to create and what the future is going to look like. When we created our Vision 2030, it's no mistake that talent was really the number one pillar, because I think we're recognizing that as our state continues to change, the kind of jobs we're attracting continue to evolve, the kind of talent we need to attract continues to change. I think Senator Pate asked a good question a moment ago. How is it that these changes aren't being adapted? And actually, change is happening rapidly. So I think the challenge we face in business is probably communicating clearly what those changes are. I think in Tom and Scott's case, they're up to the challenge of listening to what those needs are and adapting. But the nimbleness by which our processes are changing, I think, are critical. But again, you have a state, everywhere I travel, and I travel a couple days a week, I'm with companies every week that have jobs they can't fill. And what always impresses me about that observation is it's not the urban areas, it's not the rural areas, it's everywhere. In fact, nationally, the National Association of Manufacturers put out a data point within the last year. There's 600,000 manufacturing jobs in America that if the right person showed up for that job, they'd hire that person on the spot. So again, it's a blessing of opportunity and challenges. I think North Carolina is better positioned than most to deal with that, but still day in and day out companies are looking for the right talent, the right people, as Jim Collins talks about, to put on the bus and in the right seats. And I think that's why it's important to the North Carolina Chamber as a group with 35,000 members. We work with 85 local chambers across the state. Whenever I'm with them, this point gets echoed. So again, I think there's this sort of all-in approach to education and talent are critical. Figuring out those challenges, I think, are where we perhaps add some value, and then making that clear point to the legislature and elected officials how we can help them do what has to happen in North Carolina is probably where we fit in. Good.
Well, following up on that, what are the workforce ready programs being implemented in various counties? You know, are they primarily certification programs, and where are they located?
Yeah, I think you know, Scott's probably in a better position to talk about county by county what's happening, but one of the things that we've just launched, actually, we'll launch here in a couple weeks, is this Certified Skills Ready Communities initiative. So part of our observation as we went around the state, finding some of the observations I just made earlier is we have enormous supply of talent, supply of people that are busy looking for jobs, and in many cases it's not inventoried. So working closely with DPI, NC Works, the community college system, the university system, we'll actually be, through our foundation, certifying communities across the state that are certified skills-ready communities as a way of showing existing employers what kind of talent is in their community. But more importantly, when the governor and economic development professors are looking at bringing jobs to different regions, how do you create that inventory of talent that already exists? And again, nationally, ACT tells us we have some of the highest number of ACT certified talent anywhere in America in North Carolina. So again, it's that untapped, in this case, unknown resource that we're working to bring some attention to.
Good. So how do we support our rural counties and rural areas so that they have a workforce that will attract businesses to the area?
Yeah, I think the approach we've taken is sort of top-down, looking at our legislative agenda over the last 3 to 4 years. I think the approach we've taken is if we're going to create 1 million new jobs, those jobs will be created all across our state. I won't kid you, some of it will happen in the rural, in the urban areas just because there's concentration happening there. But we think when the business climate's more competitive, and studies that we've seen show that we're making real progress around areas like tax, legal reform, reg reform, workers' comp, unemployment insurance. We're busy working on the things that actually make jobs uncompetitive and cost more no matter where they're created. So by taking down those barriers, we think we've probably created some real opportunities in rural North Carolina and urban North Carolina to bring that 1 million new jobs by 2030.
Well, I guess one final question for you is, if you have a vision of, say, having the business community involved in, say, tutoring, and you know, a vision of like tutoring between 2 and 5 in the afternoon, mentoring, tutoring, just trying to decrease the opportunity gap. Do you have any thoughts about how we make this happen, how we make that connect?
You know, it's kind of amazing. I don't know that we've taken an inventory on that, but I'm with a lot of companies every week that are busy doing that. And it's probably one of the least known factoids of business in our state. I'm with companies every day that are basically saying this is what we do. This is what our employees do on a regular basis. Whether it's Thomasville Bus here in High Point, Fidelity in the Triangle. So I think the good news is companies, and what I find in this state is they're busy doing the right thing, but in many cases they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to brag about it. They don't want to make a news story about it because in their opinion they think that's just the right thing to do for North Carolina. So we're certainly busy, you know, encouraging that environment, but I'm actually so impressed with employers in our state that are busy recognizing, no matter where they're located, with thousands of employees, and I think they employ 1.3 million across the state, this is the right thing to do in our state.
Absolutely.
And they're busy doing it.
Yes. And some companies even providing days off, paid days off to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, Tom, let's move to you. We know that the future requires a highly educated workforce, and the ability to attract and retain businesses in North Carolina is dependent upon it. What does that mean for the North Carolina university system? And I'm talking about in terms of investing in facilities, faculty, and developing curriculum aligned to needs.
Well, let me start by saying that I think the university has been historically in North Carolina, if not at the very core of driving the economy. It's certainly been a major player in driving the economy. In higher education, if you look at community colleges and our private colleges and universities and the University of North Carolina, in and of ourselves, we're a big piece of the economy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, we'll be expecting to release an economic impact analysis early next month, which I think will show that the state's gross domestic product is, there's a significant percentage of it that is in higher education. So we're part of the economy to begin with. Secondly, I think that if we're going to be the kind of state we want to be, then we have to remain competitive in higher education, just like we do in lots of other areas. You know, when you think about that, what you have to do is look at around the country and say, well, what's the competition doing? Last year, all but about 3 states in America reinvested in higher education. And a number of those states set up specific funds. Connecticut and Florida did this, I know, that were designed to target the best faculty, to go and steal the best faculty, because faculty are the key resource of a university, and many of them are also revenue generators for the state. They bring in grants, and those grants result in jobs, and if you lose the professor, you lose the grant with it most often. And so we've got to remain competitive. And so the first thing I think that has got to be talked about is compensation for faculty and staff. We are, if you look at the average, we're at about a 1.5% total increase for faculty and staff in now almost 7 years. We can't stay competitive unless we address that issue. It's got to be done, or we're going to see, as we're already seeing, higher turnover among faculty. And I think, you know, you talk about the university, and you mentioned the number of employers that rely upon the universities, colleges and universities in North Carolina to produce their talent, to give them the workforce that they need. Well, that's what the business we're in. We're in the business of producing talent. So as you heard the young woman from the U.S. Chamber say, it is about talent. Lou has said that. It is about talent. It's a competition for the best talent. And businesses are going to go and locate where the talent is, and where there are talent producers that will continue to have a stream of talented individuals that can come work for them. And colleges and universities and the community college system are key to that talent production. And if you want to produce the best talent, it's just like in business. If you want to produce the best product, then you want the best machines or the best employees. Well, the best talent producers are the best faculty, and so we've got to pay attention to that. The other place where I think we got to watch the competition, if you all got one of these, I think if you look at the chart and you see on the front page of it, it talks about the shift between jobs that were held by people with a high school degree or lower, and people that now are going to have an associate's degree or higher. And it is a dramatic shift, and it continues to move very quickly. And frankly, if you look at the numbers, there are already more jobs in North Carolina that require a 4-year degree or higher than we have people living here that have 4-year degrees or higher. So that's one of the reasons employers are having a tough time, is because we just don't have the talent force that we need. We're doing all we can. If you look at our numbers, you will see that since I've been president, I've cut cost per degree by about 17% when you adjust for inflation, and we've increased production by nearly 20%. So we're producing a lot more degrees at lower cost. But they've got to be quality degrees. That was the other point that was made earlier, is people want not only a credential, but they want that credential to mean something. It has to be a quality credential. And so focusing on educational attainment is a big part of our strategic plan that we adopted in 2012. And we're not on track to get where we need to go because we're not able to do all that we need to do right now. But our plan would have us do, let me just mention a couple of them because I think they're really important. One of the keys is being sure that we reach out to the community of active military and veterans in this state. That is a group of individuals that make great employees. Many of them need additional education. And we are doing a lot of different things to try to attract them. One of the places where we need your help is getting in-state tuition. We're now required to do that by the federal government. We tried to get this last year and it didn't work, and we're now going to be required to do it effective July 1st or lose our ability to get GI Bill funding for our students. And so it's really important that we focus on getting in-state tuition for veterans. It's also important that we have the tools to be able to reach out to those that are active in the military and those that are veterans. And we have places on the base at Fort Bragg and at Camp Lejeune where we are providing advice and counsel to active duty military who want to continue their education. We need resources to be able to focus on online courses, to be able to develop more and more online courses, and particularly those that can be started at any time. You know, the world is not semester-based. We need to be able to offer students the ability to start a course on a Monday in October and be able to finish it in 8 weeks. Because otherwise they're going to get deployed and not have that opportunity to finish the course. So there's a lot like that we're already doing, but we need to do more of it and we need to do it faster. We also need to reach out to the 1.5 million North Carolinians that have some college credit but don't have a degree. And I think that's a place where we need to focus marketing efforts to find the people. We need to work with businesses to be sure that they help us identify that workforce and help us know how can we deliver education to them while they can still stay employed. And that's, again, something we're working with using technology. I think it's also important if we're going to compete in the STEM world, if we're going to have the engineers and the scientists and everything that we need to be competitive, we have to have state-of-the-art equipment and facilities. We have a number of our campuses that have old, out-of-date science buildings that we've had no new construction in our system in a long time. The state hadn't been able to afford it. I'm not blaming anybody, it's just a fact. But we've got to think as a state, how are we going to invest in the university so that we can be sure we're producing talent that is ready. And then finally, the last thing I'd say is that, if you're going to be an effective employee in the world of tomorrow, you have to be able to engage globally, not just in your community, not just in your state, and really not just in this country. The economy is too tied together all around the world. In order for students to be ready, they need to have exposure to the global economy and to the cultures of the world. So that means travel abroad experiences, it means international students, it means internship opportunities, and all of those are difficult to provide in public universities. We do some interesting work, I think, right now to try to make those opportunities available as best we can. We have a number of our universities that have interactive online classes with students all around the world. If you go down to East Carolina and you're willing to get up and be in the classroom at 7 o'clock, you can share the classroom with a group of students at Nanjing University in China. It's 7 at night there. I attended the class in Nanjing. It was easier than being there at 7 in the morning. But I mean, that kind of interrelationship, that's the only exposure some of our students have, but that's important exposure. And we can do a better job there for our students, and we have to if we're going to be globally engaged. So, we're doing our best to figure out how to fund a lot of our needs ourselves. And we've done that by becoming much more efficient, as I indicated. But it is an enterprise that takes an investment on an ongoing basis if we're going to be successful. An investment in our human capital, an investment in our equipment and facilities, and an investment in the new kinds of education, the new kinds of delivery of education. Both the technology, but also the training. The training of faculty is going to be very, very important for us down the road.
Okay. One more question for you that sort of a different, taking a different path. How do we support pathways for students to encourage them to pursue what is best for them, which may not necessarily be a four-year degree? And that's an interesting question to ask you, with your history,
Right.
and we're all used to promoting that, but I'm really interested in hearing your comments on that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody at the university believes that every North Carolinian ought to have a four-year degree. There are plenty of wonderful job opportunities for people that don't have a four-year degree. I think if you look at the data, one of the places we are going to be the least competitive is in the number of four-year degrees, and particularly the number of graduate degrees. Those are the places we're going to be the least competitive if we don't pay attention to it. So I think we have to, this is not an either or, it's a both. And I think what we need to do is expose students to the extent we can to what those opportunities are for them, and let them choose what excites them and what interests them. We have, I think, a great working relationship with the community colleges in North Carolina. Scott is an incredibly cooperative partner. We have a new articulation agreement that makes a seamless pathway between us. We've worked out lots of 2+2 programs and articulation agreements in particular areas of high need, so that we're trying to cooperate as much as we can. So if a student starts at a community college thinking, well, this is what I want to do, but they figure out, well, no, I need a four-year degree, then we're going to have a pathway for them to get there. By the same token, we have a program right now called reverse transfer. And that is a student who comes to us without an associate's degree from the community colleges, but who earns enough credits while they're in the university to get an associate's degree. We have worked out a situation where we can transfer back the credit hours from the university back to the community college. Good. And the community college will then award an associate's degree. We're doing that for the first time. And that gives that individual a credential that will help them in the workforce. If they don't finish their four-year degree, they'll at least have that credential. And there are a lot of students that fall through the cracks on that now. Further, we know if they get that associate's degree, they're much more likely to finish their four-year degree. So we've got to continue to look for ways like that we can cooperate together. And I think the other place is the involvement of the business community in helping us set up more and more internship opportunities for students, whether they're in the community colleges or the universities or in high school. They need to be exposed to what it means to work. They need to have that practical experience. And I describe what we need in any workforce is T-people, people who have the breadth of a broad-based education, but also who have the depth of understanding how to go deep on something. You might do that in a research lab, but you can also do it in an internship working in a business. So I think there are a lot of places where we can cooperate in that regard.
Good, thank you. Jeff, we know that North Carolina's reputation for having a talented workforce is what attracted your company to the state. Is that what will keep you here?
Well, we're not about to leave, I can assure you that. And first, let me start by saying thank you, Governor Hunt and the Hunt Institute, for inviting me and letting MetLife share some of our views. I really, and we representing MetLife, feel quite honored to have been asked. So, what are we going to do to stay? Why do we want to stay? Is that what you want to know?
Well, we know that talented workforce is what brought you here. Is that what's going to keep you here?
You know, we came, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we came, not the least of which was $90 million of incentives, so I might as well get that out on the table. But aside from that, you had to be living in a cave to not know that North Carolina is one of the very best places to start a business, to grow a business, to raise a family, to find great talent. For us specifically in Raleigh, that's been associated with what we see here with all the other high-tech organizations, as well as with the universities. So there's a plethora of skill sets available. Now, having said that, it's not always easy to find those skills to fill all of the positions, as as Tom has just said. we have more jobs available than we can find people. And as a consequence, we end up going outside of the area, outside of the geography and the state to try to fill some of those positions. It's really, difficult. I think it was Cheryl who spoke last, about, what it is that we can do to have more technology jobs. I'll give you an example. I was at NC State a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke to a graduate class in, this was in computer science. There were about 250 people in the graduate class. They were all we were talking big data. It was kind of exciting in terms of, what we were talking about, but they were all there because they wanted jobs. So at one point I said, okay, for all of you people, how many of you don't need an H-1B visa? And out of 200 or so, there might have been 10 people that raised their hands. They were all foreigners. They were all from India, China, whatever. We don't have students coming through our university systems in any measure, to fill the needs that we have in business. And it is, I'll look to you guys to help with that. Who was it that spoke earlier? Mike Hood? Horn. There's lots of great ways to do this, and I know you all are looking at it, but we need you to focus on it more because we need a better pipeline into the colleges so we can then help pull those kids.
Good. This next question reminded me of a book I read some years ago, Diffusion of Innovation, where it talked about some of the extremely successful companies that were wildly successful and are no longer in business today. And one of the reasons was they were paying so much attention to the immediate needs and meeting their clients' needs. They weren't really looking to the future. So what we all want is a talented workforce, not just focusing on the skills required for today, but for the future. How can we incorporate innovation into the conversation?
That's a marvelous question. If anyone has an answer to that, I'm happy to take it, because we have not found a lot of the talent that we're getting to be great innovators. They just aren't. The kids coming out of the universities are too absolute oriented. They're not driven to new ideas or solving complex problems. And I don't know if that's because of the generation. Sometimes we think it's part of the helicopter parents. And we all know there are helicopter parents out there that you just want your kids to get the best grades at the best schools so they get the best jobs, but you don't really teach them how to be innovators and how to do innovative thinking. So they come to us, and as a consequence, one of the things we started our own university. I call it a university. All we do is we take kids, we just graduated a class last week, 50 kids, because once they get to us, they don't have the skill sets that we need. And so we have to retrain them what it's like to work in a business, to think outside of the box, to be innovative, to add value. And they don't, even though they're bright and they have a good degree and they come from good schools, they don't just have that.
And that's expensive for businesses.
Indeed, it's very expensive.
Yes.
It's very expensive.
How have you changed your recruitment and hiring practices to make sure that you have the workforce
Good.
you'll need?
So as we moved, part of the reason we moved here was to create a new culture and a new dynamic within MetLife, because those that we had were, historically, we were siloed and we weren't thinking very creatively. So we've hired about 1,050 so far, and about 900 of those are brand new versus transfers coming down. So one of the things we did is for all of our managers, we sent them to training on behavioral-based interviewing. 50% of what we hire on is based on behaviors. The other 50, we're expecting people coming out, that we're hiring coming out of the university systems to be, smart and talented and know, their A, B's, and C's. But how do you create behaviors? Teamwork, collaboration, prioritizing for greatest impact, working together as teams. That's hard. And so we trained everybody, literally 50%. The last set of evaluations is based on how well you manage to those behaviors. And there were some skeptics, and yet we found it's been incredibly valuable in terms of the kinds of individuals that we've hired. And as we've compared them to other groups at MetLife today and other parts of the country, it is absolutely a different mindset, a different culture that has been developed here than it is at these other locations. And we're very pleased with that.
Well, that leads me in a way to the next question. As you're looking for talent, I know that all of this is important, but how much emphasis is placed on a particular degree versus the ability to think critically, collaborate, create, and communicate?
It's more the latter. We look for computer science degrees, but as I mentioned earlier, there just aren't enough computer science kids. Top 10% either go to California or New York, so then you're dealing with another set. So if you have people and they have the right behaviors, they know how to collaborate and work together, they want to make a difference, it's up to us to give them those opportunities, and we'll pay the money to train them to do some more work, but that's the path that we're going down. And I'd love to, if they were all enough computer science, we'd probably do that, but we found business majors, science majors. There's, to our surprise, we found a program at UNCW that is kind of a business and technology degree that has really been good. NCA&T has a program where they train kids on mainframes, the old 30-year-old systems. That is really good. And as you get into the university system that Tom has, different pockets throughout our system have good things. It's finding those pockets and then attracting people. NC State, another, has some great programs in place. But you have to, there's not a magic place to go and say, where can you find that right skill set? So it's taken us a lot of time to find those. But once you do, they're really quite good.
Good. Sounds like a great company to work for.
Fantastic. Any of your children out there that are looking for a place, you just call me. I can help you.
Okay, on the end, Scott, last but not least, community colleges occupy a unique educational space in relation to connecting education and the economy. In fact, community colleges were created around the economic connections. What strides have you made in the past 5 years to ensure your students are prepared for the workforce they will enter? What are some recent trends that are presenting, particularly in technical education, healthcare, and other industry-defined competencies or credentials?
Okay. First, Happy New Year. It's good to see everybody. We do kind of occupy a unique space in higher ed and in education in general, that sort of connection between the jobs and education. And just to give you a sense, we were started that way going back before we were community colleges to the industrial education centers that Governor Hodges started in the 1950s. But if you look at where we are now, the Department of Commerce recently released data that showed that of all the wage earners in North Carolina today, a little over 40% of all wage earners have been a community college student within the last 10 years, which is, I think, rather remarkable given the amount of in-migration we have as a state. So we do occupy a very unique place, and therefore we have to really think about that. Now, what are some of the trends, some of the progress points in the last 5 years? One of the things in the last 5 years, as you all know very well, we know post-recession has been a time of resource scarcities relative to previous resource more abundance in that time. So all of us have had to think about resource priorities, and that's something we've been doing in the community colleges. So let me just mention 3 priorities for us, and I think places where we have made some good progress. One of which is with respect to a group of jobs out there that are often overlooked. In fact, Brookings Institution recently did a study of this, and they call it the hidden STEM economy. And what they meant by that is, from their definition, 20% of all jobs are STEM jobs in the economy right now, but half of those jobs are often overlooked because they fall within sub-bachelor level, community college level education that are STEM jobs. So what are those? Those are the healthcare jobs. You know, it's not the doctors, but it's just about everything else at the hospital and all the technicians that come in. It's high-level production manufacturing, biotech and other areas, but other higher level of advanced manufacturing. It is the biggest category is maintenance and repair. And when you talk to employers, they will often say that is the biggest crisis point is maintenance and repair. It's high-end computing in terms of certain skills like programming skills, networking skills. We do a lot of that. So those are the kinds of areas that we talk about. Now the challenge is what we wanted to do is we felt that we, at least as we're reducing per student funding, we have to hold on to those areas and try to increase volume in those areas. So in some cases, we do less of certain areas than we used to. We don't do as many senior citizen programs. Probably each of you know that well because you've probably gotten all those calls in the last few years. We don't do as much in terms of prison programs as we used to. But what we have tried to do, and you've worked with us very well on this, is try to prioritize resources towards those healthcare, technical education, science programs, math programs, and industry certification training programs that lead to third-party certification. And if you look at us over about a 3-year period of time, we have had an 8% enrollment movement toward those areas relative to where it was before. And that was before you all helped us this year in realigning some resources, savings into those areas, into particular those very high healthcare and technical education areas. So we think that trend is going to continue. We're seeing good movement in that regard. We'll never be able to do enough because that's where those jobs are. If you look at the jobs that are re-advertised after 40 weeks, those are the most likely jobs to be re-advertised over 40 weeks. They also provide great wages, $53,000 on average, which is the same average wage for someone with a bachelor's degree in those sub-bachelor areas. So that's been a priority for us. Number 2 is we have to think a little differently. One of the ways we're thinking differently is we have to think more about our programs as pathways, not just collections of courses, and that requires you to think of the outcome in mind. Now, here's what I mean by that, is we're a little different in higher education. I've been doing this for about 18 years. Now, you can go around the state and you'll find kids that say, I always dreamed to go to Carolina, to NC State, to Duke, to Appalachian, to East Carolina. In 18 years, I've never talked to one of our students who said it was my lifelong dream to go to Guilford Tech, to go to Wade. That's not what we are. But here's what we are unique. We are the pathways. We are the pathways. And when you look at the number of folks coming through us, 830,000 people this year, we are the pathways to opportunity. Now, where are our folks going? The first place they're looking is, for the majority, is a pathway to a job. Most of our students, our average age is 28. Our kids are mostly not kids, they're adults, and they're coming to us to get to a job. So we have to think, what's the best way to get them to a job? And then the second place they're looking to go is to the universities. So what we've had to do is step back and think about each of those places along the way. We think about in terms of connection. Our work with the public schools is now based on pathways, career and college promise. Students don't just enroll in community college courses, they enroll in pathways. The entry points, this notion of entering that most of them were doing in terms of remediation, we've completely rethought that. The progress points, our focus on stackable certification, and then a real focus on completion and what does that mean. So that way of thinking for us in terms of pathways is completely different than I think we were 5 years ago, where before we were an access point for cheap higher ed. Now we really think in terms of we're the pathways to first jobs and second to university opportunities. Third thing I want to mention is we've completely rethought and redeveloped how we teach math, because we've looked at the places where we lose students, and math is the Bermuda Triangle of higher education. And so we've completely redeveloped how we teach remedial math, accelerated, modular, and then we have redesigned all of our math courses, primarily because we were teaching a lot about teaching folks how to memorize math. not how to use math, not how to do math, not how it fits into their job outcomes or their university outcomes. And we've completely redeveloped that in over a 4 to 5 year period. Here's some good news for you. Last year, the first full year of implementation in this regard, we were slightly down in enrollment, and most community colleges across the nation have been down in enrollment for a period of years. That's not unusual. Slightly down in enrollment, but we had 8% more students enrolled in math courses, and over 5,000 students completed a college-level math course than they did the year before. We really like that a lot. And we think that makes a difference, not just for moving forward to the university, but that's becoming key to moving into the workplace, because machining is now about math and diagnosing, even automotive mechanics. So it is totally connected to the whole workforce discussion.
Computer science, too.
Computer science, it's all about symbolism and diagnosing with technology, abstract thinking.
You're working in partnership with the Department of Commerce on surveying the needs of the local workforce. You've surveyed all 100 counties. Can you just very briefly share with us about this work?
Yeah, we just wrapped that up in partnership with the Department of Commerce. We call it 1,000 and, or I always get it wrong, 100. What we've done is in all 100 counties, we've gone to at least 10 business owners and companies in each of those 100 counties, more in many of the other counties. It's the largest on-site employer survey in the history of North Carolina. I'm going to leave it for the governor to announce the results, and truly, I don't know the final results. I've just seen where we were before we were heading into the holidays, because we were wrapping it up. But I will tell you the two areas that I don't think will change. Number one is technical skills. There is still, with all the efforts that have been made, there's a huge outcry for technical skills. And I often feel that technical education probably has the greatest gap between the amount of hand-wringing we collectively do and concerted action that actually takes place. To me, it's the too often overlooked and forgotten part of education. The other place is probably more labeled soft skills, you know. And what do we mean by soft skills? It usually falls into two things. One is being individually responsible, showing up, and the other is just, you know, not being a jerk. You know, those two things are kind of really what explains. We still struggle for how you do that, how you teach that, what you do in that regard. I often call those the firing skills. Typically, it's technical skills that get people hired, and it's those other things that get you fired real quick. That's sort of a broad theme.
Okay, thank you. Well, we need to wrap this up, so I'm going to give you each one more opportunity to respond. What can policymakers do to support some of the ideas we have discussed? How do we keep the conversation going? If you could give me your final thoughts on how we should be thinking about this. So, and very briefly, each one, what one thing do you want to leave us with? And we'll start with Lou.
Great. Since I was a stand-in here, I wasn't prepared to answer that question, but I think from our vantage point, I would kind of come back to economic growth and opportunity. And I think states that are busy solving for that will be the big winners, not only in America, but around the world. So as long as you're helping us advance policies that grow the economy, those million jobs we envision will come here. They'll be the kind of jobs you heard the panel talk about that we'll need. But again, I think that pro-growth mindset permeate your work, permeate our work. And I think what I find encouraging with this group of leaders here is, again, 100% agreement on what needs to happen. I think a growing economy creates the opportunity for those resources to become available. So we'd encourage you to think about the kind of opportunities that growth brings. And actually, North Carolina is at the receiving end of probably some of the most significant growth in America is going to happen right here. So we probably have the biggest challenge and opportunity that most states would love to have. And we need your help to deal with that.
Thank you. Tom?
Well, I think I would start by saying, there's a lot of exciting things that are going on in the university. And I learn about new ones every day. And I think more than anything, I'd like to leave you with the plea that you remember what a treasure the the University of North Carolina is to the state of North Carolina, and how important it has been to driving the economy of this state and producing the kind of workforce that we need, but also the kind of communities in which we want to live. And we can't afford to give that up, because I think if we do, companies like MetLife, companies that Lou works with regularly, they won't see North Carolina as the place they want to go, because they won't find the talent there that they need. So remember what a treasure we have and help us figure out the best ways to preserve it. It's not always money. Sometimes it's helping us with policy issues and regulations and so forth. But sometimes it is investment. And I think it is an investment. I think we can show you a return on investment, and you'll see some of this when our economic impact analysis comes out, that there's a real benefit to North Carolina, to the people of this state, and to the economy by investing in the university. And other states are doing it. And if you want to remain competitive, we've got to look at this as an investment and not just an expenditure that we can cut.
Thank you. Jeff?
I'll start by saying a couple of weeks ago, Lou had some conference at the Umstead on education, and you had someone speaking there from Harvard, and he talked about us still teaching in a 19th century environment in the 21st century, the process. And he went into details in terms of a better way that we should be teaching our students. And I tried to relate that to what Mike Horn said this morning and what others have said in terms of either doing the internet in the classrooms. Is it Joe was saying, Western North Carolina, you need the high-speed internet. I think it's probably across North Carolina to have the PCs in the classrooms for the students, for the teachers. Someone else, maybe it was Cheryl, mentioned this rotational thing. I mean, we have to change and change the way that we're teaching the kids, and that takes investment, whether that's the high-speed internet or PCs in the classrooms, helping to train the teachers. And what everyone has said, I mean, you can't get around it. It is how we have to invest. Our future with, training students is going to change. And the use of technology is what's going to drive that. John Chambers, who was the CEO of Cisco, made the comment that, there's no longer technology companies. Every company is a technology company, because if you don't use technology effectively in your organization for competitive advantage, you're not going to achieve the targets and the goals, whether that's a nonprofit or a profit kind of organization. So my message to you is, we're here for the long haul. We need the students coming through. They need, and the teachers and the superintendents need your assistance in funding, the use of those technologies, the training of the teachers so that they can be effective. And I think they all want it. I think they want it more than you even want to, you can imagine. But it's up to you to help them get it. And then I think we'll see wondrous things.
Good. Scott?
I believe educational policy, we still are too outdated in our thinking. We're still either or in our thinking, and we have to have more what I would call and thinking. What I mean by that is we typically fall into the traps of, it's either career technical education or it's college prep, when really we should be talking about and. We don't need to have college prep that doesn't have career. That's probably part of the reason you run into the issues. And the other side is career technical education has to have high rigor now in terms of math and other types. So we need more and thinking and not this old trap of either or. We fall into those traps institutionally as well. Either you're community college bound or you're university bound, and the walls of our institutions, we still think very institutionally, become more and more lower and more porous because of technology. And so the big things happen between public schools, community colleges, universities as they come together. And so I know that's kind of an abstract way of thinking, but I do think our education policy is still very much dominated by either or thinking, not enough and thinking.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much to our panel, and I think we're out of time. So appreciate your
Terrific panel,
attention.
Barbara. Thank you for your chairmanship and all.